Welcome to the Endurance Drive podcast.
Our mission is to share the key principles that structure our approach to endurance training and coaching.
I'm Jim.
And I'm Katie.
Hey, Katie, how are you?
I am good. We're in November. We're in sort of a weird time in the coaching space.
We're in a weird time. Just for context, you could either be watching Charlie Brown's Great Pumpkin or you could be watching Charlie Brown's Thanksgiving, and it's kind of all relevant this time of year. So it's kind of a weird, it's a weird in between, right? We're not full Charlie Brown Christmas yet, right?
I know. I'm looking forward to that moment. I will never forget the entire December that we spent in the Pain Cave listening exclusively to Charlie Brown Christmas soundtrack before we knew that you could also listen to other music and watch fun shows and everything. But yeah, it's a weird time of year. And I think it's a little weird in the coaching space just because it almost feels like the calm before the storm, where I have all my athletes lined up, ready to get started, mostly like around January 1st. But right now my roster is pretty small because everyone's really enjoying the off season. So I don't even know what's to come. I'm excited about it. I'm a little bit nervous about it. But right now I'm just trying to bask in this off season continued glow of a little bit more quiet time.
You're exactly right. No, it does feel like the calm for the storm. And I feel like I have 3 different athletes now. And one is the athletes who've been on off season already, like they finished up their races and they're ready to come back November 1st, December 1st. So those folks are sort of trickling in. And then we have all of our great people who just ran New York Marathon. Congratulations to everyone, by the way. But those folks are going to take an off season now. So we're probably not going to see them back until probably like January 1. And then we've got, new athletes who are filtering in. And, that's the start of maybe December 1, January 1. So it is a funny time. But anyway, it's a great time to sort of reflect on like how to set yourself up for next season. I think that's what we're going to talk about today. Is that right?
Yes, this is a conversation I have been having with a lot of my athletes who we haven't even started programmed workouts yet, but we're talking about, hey, what should we actually be doing right now? So we decided instead of have that conversation 50 times, we're just going to distill it into a podcast episode. But before we do that, I think we should get started with some coaching and training insights. So can I take it away, Jim?
Let's go.
All right. Okay. So first one here. I have talked on the podcast a little bit so far about how I have been really enjoying gravel biking recently. And I've sort of transitioned into this phase where I don't even want to touch my road bike or my triathlon bike. Certainly not my triathlon bike. I've put that on the trainer and it's not coming outside until probably April. But my gravel bike has been really, really fun. And in particular, I've been taking it on some actually mountain bike trails in a state park pretty close to Boston. It's called Wampatuck if anyone ever wants to check it out. And it's really interesting because, my gravel bike's pretty beefy. It can handle most types of terrain, but it's really new for me to be working on super, super technical stuff. And usually what these types of workouts amount to is I'll bike over to the park, I'll get on the single track, I'll end up in sort of zone 1 heart rate for a lot of it because it's not very hilly, but it requires so much focus and a lot of new technical skills that are totally just leveling up my bike handling in a way that's been really, really exciting. And it's fun too because I don't even have a power meter on my gravel bike. And I absolutely love that because I throw any metrics that matter to me on a road bike or triathlon bike completely out the window. Don't care about pace because sometimes I could probably run faster than I am riding my gravel bike on these trails. And I don't care about power because that's just not what the focus is. Maybe for some really elite mountain bikers, power factors in or something. But here it's all about those technical skills. And then while I'm doing that, I'm enjoying the fall weather. I'm getting outside. I have this exploration mindset because it's this brand new park with so many trails that I've never seen before. And I'm thinking about mindfulness when I'm hitting that technical terrain. So anyway, I think all of this is actually a really, really good organic way for me to approach the off season because it's not straining my body in a huge way. It's instead working my mind and giving me some really fun mindfulness. And then the last thing I wanted to share about this really, really fun focus on gravel biking is that it actually is kind of outside of my comfort zone. And a couple of episodes ago, we talked about self-belief and how sometimes your self-belief can be highest when you're brand new at something because you don't really know what the parameters are for being good at it or bad at it. So for me, I eke out a 0.1 mile downhill scary section and make it through just fine. And I'm like, you know what? Katie, you crushed that. That's awesome. Whereas if I'm on my road bike, it takes a lot for me to give myself some positive self-talk for yet another zone 2 ride. So and again, too, I'm doing a lot of this adventuring pretty solo. So I have no concept of what it means to go fast or be skilled. And so I just think in general, advice here is if anyone can lean into things that allow us to feel like a beginner or flex different skills that are still actually in that endurance domain, it can be really fun. I've talked about too, getting on a pickleball court or just doing things that are a little bit different. So yeah, I said I was going to stop talking about the off season, but this is tangentially related. And as long as it stays 70 degrees, I will be on the mountain bike trails on my gravel bike.
Yeah, I love this for so many reasons. And yeah, one from the practical standpoint, you mentioned it, which is like, it's going to be really interesting to hear how you feel when you get back on your road bike or your TT bike, just to see, like, I suspect you're going to be a much better bike handler. Not that you're a good bike handler now, but it'll be really interesting to get back on it and feel what your impressions are like going down hills and corners. And will you say like, oh, I've gained a bunch of skill, or you'd be like, it's about the same as usual. I don't know. It'd be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, always it's the end of one experiment, right? And this is the first time that I've ever focused on this, so I assume it will help me in some way. I don't really know what that way is. But if not, hey, I'm getting out in nature and trying something a little bit different. And I am getting better at, any type of unexpected thing or something that's outside of my comfort zone. I'd like to think there's a little bit of translation there. So I don't know. Definitely recommend everybody get a gravel bike, gear pick of the week. Just go get one and do all the fun things.
Exactly right. With a wax chain, of course, yes.
For sure. Definitely. And then another insight for me, I guess my insights are a little bit me focused this week, but just sharing some fun stuff I've been working on, and I've been talking to athletes about this, is it's just about time to get serious about strength training. Just because we're sort of transitioning back into the beginning of a season, it's great to lay a huge foundation for your later kind of endurance escapades. And so I have been hitting it pretty hard in the gym. That's the one thing that I'm doing right now that has a good amount of structure. And I work with a strength trainer. And so this is the first time that I've actually really done kind of a periodization of my strength training. So we did some really good kind of recovery PT focused stuff in September and October after my goal races. Now we're moving into basically 3 months of what they're calling this general prep phase. And it's basically like building muscle, like real hypertrophy, heavy lifting, heavy weighted strength, usually about 2 times a week in the gym. And what's interesting is that has become my big rock of any given day. So I'm doing a bunch of like little trail runs and gravel biking stuff, but that's always kind of the second stimulus and something that's not as important as the really, really intense lifting that I'm doing. So a couple of cool things that I'm noticing that I would love to pass on to others who might be interested in dabbling in strength. First of all, strength gains happen really, really fast, and a little bit goes a long way here. So I noticed that like 2 weeks in, a total of 4 sessions in this general prep phase, I was like, oh, wow, apparently I have deltoids and lats. Like that's a new thing for me. I've never even seen them before, which was kind of cool to just experience that where, each additional zone 2 run, I feel like isn't really moving the needle, at least in my book anymore. Sometimes we see those gains quickly, sometimes we don't. But strength is like, wow, I just spent a little time here and I feel awesome. Second, again, I'm going to plug doing this at the end of the fall to kick off your season. You'll be bulletproof when you get there. And when it's time to layer on volume, you're going to be a lot more durable, which is really important. So now is the time to do that. And then the third key point here is that in order to progress at strength, you do need to do what's called progressive overload. And that just means increasing the weight or increasing the number of reps over time. I was someone who in the past would basically just do the same strength routine every single time I went to the gym. And if you think about it, if there's no new stimulus, you're not really going to improve. So progressive overload is all about increasing the stimulus a little bit. And now that our goal is building muscle, that makes a lot of sense. Where maybe later in the season, it would be okay to kind of back things off and just try to maintain where you're at because we have much bigger fish to fry when it comes to like our really hard bike and run and swim intervals. So all this is to say, I'm loving the gym, super fun, especially as the weather gets colder. Final tip is that keep in mind that heavy lifting, while it doesn't really seem like a huge stimulus all the time, I find that absolutely revs my metabolism so much. So be sure to keep up really great fueling as well as really great protein intake if you want to get those muscle gains. But yeah, I'm in my gym girly era and it feels really, really good.
Yeah, brah. Go. Do you carry like a gallon jug of water there as well too?
So I carry 1 gallon jug of water and then 1 huge tub of creatine and then 1 under each arm. And then I run up the stairs holding both of those.
Yeah, really seeing gains from that. Yeah.
Yeah. And they play the Rocky theme in the back and everyone cheers. Yeah. It's awesome.
I get it. Actually, I chuckled your last point here, which is revving up the metabolism, because I've also been doing some heavy lifting and I have a new Smith machine in the pain cave, which I'm going to talk about in the next episode of why I love the Smith machine so much and why it's the perfect tool for triathletes. But anyway, the other day I thought I'm going to do some max like shoulder presses, and that was kind of fun and it was safe to do on the Smith machine. But then I finished lifting, and then about an hour later, all of a sudden I had this deep hunger. I'm like, what the hell is that? And I realized, oh my gosh, that's the heavy lifting that's coming back to like this is like a monster. Like you have got to eat more. So I don't know, did you get that like deep hunger sometimes?
Yeah. It's that and swimming. So those two are like the crazy revs of the metabolism, where sometimes I feel like running or biking can have a little bit more of an appetite suppressant effect. But yeah, lifting, it's like you're fine until you're not fine. And then you need to be in a kitchen, in a restaurant, getting food, whatever that is, almost immediately.
It's amazing how quickly I was just standing at the sink and all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I need food now. Give me.
You go straight to level hangry, like way too fast. Like
there was no transition time. Yeah, exactly. You're okay until you're not. Yeah.
Yeah. So keep up that fueling, especially with your good lifting. Okay. My last insight here. So this is a quote that I feel like is really, really important in the context of training. And it actually came up a couple episodes ago, but I've been thinking about it a lot. When we talked to the registered dietitian and chef, Megan Chakosky, we talked to her about how we should approach fueling. And she said, don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And she was talking about that where, let's say you finish up your workout and you could either like wait until you get home for 2 hours, have the perfect balanced protein shake, or you eat the Pop-Tart that's in your car. It's way better to go with the good option than the perfect option. Because again, that Pop-Tart is like satisfying what you need right there. So anyway, I've been thinking about this outside of nutrition, but also in the context of a lot of the training that we're doing, that we will start doing as this season ramps up. And so one example of this would be, hey, we talk a lot about it's great to get a super heavy weighted strength session in. You spend 60 minutes in the gym. It's awesome. But the truth is that the 20-minute body weight strength session that you do in your room at home is better than the 60-minute heavyweight progressive overload strength session at the gym that you don't do. And similarly, the 20-minute walk that you do is better than the 4-mile run that you don't do. And I think about this with swimming too. I was in the pool for the first time in a long time earlier today, and I did a very short swim. It was slow. It was not pretty. It was technique focused, but that was a lot better than the 4K fast swim that I'm absolutely not going to do right now. So maybe just some advice to everyone is don't get paralyzed by not being able to optimize for everything all of the time. If you're finding that your schedule or your life is too tight to make the perfect happen, see what you can fit in that's still good rather than skipping perfect and then not getting good either. And hopefully this is a mantra that can kind of carry us throughout the season. Exercise snacks are so powerful. Doing the best that you can is really powerful. And I'm going to try to hold on to that. As someone who can be a little bit perfectionist-y with how I approach training, I also know it's good to let good be good enough because most of the time it really is.
I have to be honest, I didn't hear anything you said. I just heard Pop-Tart. And then I was like, okay, yeah, I'm in Pop-Tart. That's it. I have no idea what else she said. So,
and then you just, it sounds like you've been heavy lifting today, Jim. Do you need to go get a snack?
Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, on to you then.
Well, you have one last one here too as well, I think.
Oh my gosh, yes, this is so important. Thank you for flagging that. This is crucially important. Wow, we're getting a little off track because we're both hungry from lifting. Important tip for all of the masses. This comes from our friend Jay Smitty, and we have learned how to turn off Strava AI. So also, I do want to shout out to all of my athletes and friends who have sent me their most frustrating Strava AI experiences recently. I see you. I am with you. I am frustrated as well, but soon to not be frustrated anymore because we learned how to turn it off. So apparently, if you go to the feedback page and hit leave beta, you no longer have to see Strava yell at you for being slower than your last run, but still a good effort. So anyone who's frustrated by the situation, feel free to check that out.
Well, I'm going to take back what I said about Strava AI being okay. So I went for a ride on my gravel bike, and of course I didn't flag it as a gravel bike in Strava. But then I came back and said, "Hey, they look pretty slow today, guy. What's going on?" So I was like, so then I went back and I created a gravel bike. Like you tag your gear, and I thought, okay, next time I go on my gravel bike, I'm going to tag it as gravel bike, and I'm going to see if it's actually smart enough to actually look at the type of bike that you're using. I don't think it is. I bet it's not. But anyway, I want to try to see that, and we'll continue the Strava AI extravaganza that we're on.
Yeah, we better. I mean, and I will say, part of me, I haven't actually turned it off yet, even though I know this tip exists, because it does always create content. And we're here for the content, especially in November when there's like not much athlete content happening. It's like we might as well get good Strava AI content. So, all right, Jim, coaching and training insights, on to you.
Okay, well, I think my first one is actually very similar to one of yours. There is a great article, Alex Hutchinson, who writes for Outside Magazine. It's called Aging Athletes, ouch me, Need to Stay Explosive. Here's how. Anyway, so the key takeaway from the study is that a typical estimate is that you lose 0.5 to 1% of your muscle mass per year once you're on the wrong side of 40, and strength generally follows a similar trajectory. But here's the kicker here. In contrast, muscle power drops by 2 to 4% per year. And you think about dropping off 2 by 4%, that is a ton of drop off. So as Katie said up here, start lifting, start doing progressive overload. And then I started thinking about this. Actually, this came from Jay Smitty as well. We were talking about learning different sports. And Jay Smitty pulls out and says, what is sports but just the transfer of power? And I was like, oh, that's right. Like once you figure out the transfer of power in any sport, like you've got it. And sort of power, just to remind people, is power is equal to force times velocity. So folks, keep doing your hill sprints because, yeah, some of us are losing it very quickly. Okay, second one here is, so on your day off, so we typically try to advocate doing something on your day off. And I find for me, a walk is great on a day off. But what I've discovered is that actually if I take 2 walks on day off, and what I've found is usually the first one in the morning or sort of maybe midday, it feels okay. It's like, yeah, kind of getting my muscles going and get things working through again. But I recently went out like later on, like maybe like in the evening time to do a second walk. And I realized that like, wow, the second walk of a day off is just delightful. And you actually can kind of feel your body has kind of recovered from the day. So anyway, it'd probably also be my challenge of the week as well too. This is a preview. But anyway, if you have a day off, try to end up walking like twice during the day and let us know how you feel between the first walk and the second walk. I found a drastic difference between the two. I don't know, Katie, have you experienced that at all?
It's funny that you mentioned this because I live in a city, and so inevitably I take a walk like 4 or 5 times a day probably. But a couple times when I've been traveling or I've been staying like in a house that's not in a city, I usually get this sluggish feeling halfway through my day off where I'm like, what is going on? This doesn't feel exactly right. So I think organically and naturally, I normally feel pretty good like a Monday off day because I just have that walk built in. So if you are someone who doesn't live in a city and doesn't have to walk everywhere that they go, I would imagine this is super helpful.
I was just amazed that I can feel the recovery. Then I was like, oh, wait, this sort of imprints that a day off is like a really good idea.
Yeah. And I think, too, it's like a little bit goes a long way here. I imagine probably 2 20-minute walks are way more effective than a single 40-minute walk just because you're spreading it out and moving your body at different points. And that's probably a good call, actually, in that what you need to do is not have a lot of load. Like before you know it, a 40 to 60-minute walk is actually a decent amount of load. But if you break it up, I think that's super smart.
Yeah. So my third one here is we talk a lot about stress and psychology here. And anyway, so I came across this NPR Stress Science 101 series, which I put a link in here. You can sign up for it. But it's really cool. So they have these 8 skills to manage stress. And I don't know, should I read all 8 here or just let people just discover these? What do you think, Katie?
I think you should read them, but I'm just going to say you're outing yourself as an old person by quoting NPR. So
okay, that's true. That is very true, right? Okay, first one, positive events. Notice when positive things happen in your life. Oh, and by the way, the reason I like these is that I actually took these 8 and I put them in a little note card. And I was like, oh, there's so many different ways to manage stress and what things are happening in our life. And I thought, this is just a really quick list for me to sort of, I could even put it like in front of my computer and say, okay, these are the things that sort of summarize what would be, reduce stress in my life. Anyway, okay. So second one here is savoring. Relish the positive things in your life. 3, gratitude. Appreciate what brings you happiness. 4, mindfulness. Focus on the present moment without judgment. 5, positive reappraisal. Find the silver lining. 6, self-compassion. Be kind to yourself. 7, personal strengths. Recognize your unique abilities. And last one, 8, attainable goals. Make plans that set you up for success.
I like this. And I think what's really special when we kind of bring this into the endurance world is that when I think through this list, if I were to, for example, think of positive events, think of personal strengths, attainable goals, etc., a lot of them center around the sport that we do in a given day. Like the things I do are usually work and then some form of training and then other things in my life, household, etc. But there's so much inspiration for all of these that comes from our sport. And I'd like to think that also when we have, for example, self-compassion with respect to our workouts and focus on our strengths, I do think there's a feedback mechanism where that makes us better as athletes. So we say we're a life psychology type podcast. We're also an endurance sport podcast. I think that's a perfect example of how they come together really nicely.
Yeah, these all really resonated with me for both, personal struggles in life and then just in the sport. It's like, oh, wait, these 8 sort of capture, I think, a lot of what we talk about here and around that
Definitely.
subject. So anyway, so I'll put that out there. Okay. My last one here is that, hey, I didn't intend to watch the men's race at Kona, but I did. And I actually was quite happy that I did. And as you know, in this podcast, we don't spend a lot of time talking about like what the pros do because that can be problematic because a lot of times they're kind of working on the last like really tough 1% for them. And a lot of times the lessons of the pros is it's really hard to put that back into, say, an age group or a level 1, level 2 athletes that we have here. But with that said, as I was watching, I was like, okay, this is an opportunity for me to take a bunch of notes just for myself and for me to remember. But a few things that I noticed I thought were kind of fun and maybe applicable was, anyway, in T1, Sam Laidlaw had put ice in his helmet. So he flips his helmet over and he's got all this ice in there and over his head. So he starts with a cold head, which I thought was a really cool thing.
I wonder if that's how he broke the bike course record by so much. I wonder if that's a secret.
Ice in the helmet probably lasted 20 seconds, as you know, Katie and Kona. But anyway, that was a cool thing.
Yeah.
On the bike, it was really interesting. I saw, and these are something that we can do as age groupers, but what we're really trying to do is you're trying to really fill the space between, your hands and your head. And some people do that with sort of a praying mantis, sort of high hands up front. And then in the past, triathletes have been putting water bottles down the front of their chest as a sort of an arrow fairing, and then they ban that. So what athletes are now doing is they're putting 2 bottles stacked on top of each other, right in the front. So normally most triathletes have maybe 1 bottle there, but now they're stacking 2 bottles and they're filling that space between the hands and the head with arrow bottles, which I thought was kind of a cool thing. I don't know if anybody's going to do that next year, but I might try that. That's kind of cool. Noticing that a lot of folks are much more stretched out to get arrow as opposed to being dropped down. And I was also really interested to see a lot of folks were using sort of this near disc wheel, which I think people have been using it for a couple of years. Again, I'm sort of dating myself here saying I haven't watched this in a while, but there's this Head Jet 180, which is almost a full disc wheel, but has a little sort of hole in the middle of it because you can't use a full disc wheel at Kona. But Kona's had pretty light winds, I think the last few years, and a near disc or a disc wheel in light winds is awesome. And if you haven't ridden a disc wheel before, if you get the right crosswind or tailwind, it'll catch your back wheel and actually kind of push you along. So I saw a lot of that. And then a lot of the folks who broke the course records this year were using that. But we don't advocate. My Gear Peak of the Week is not a $2,000 Head Jet 180 wheel, though. So
I've never ridden with a disc wheel, and that's okay with me. I'm willing to leave some performance potential on the table for the low price of not spending $2,000.
Exactly right. Yes. What else was there? Just a lot of I saw a lot of pros taking carbs in a bottle in T1. So coming out of the swim, grabbing a bottle, boom. So tons of carbs. We talk about this all the time, right? The importance of early carbs on the bike and replacing some of that energy that they used in the swim. So I saw a lot of that as well too. Tri-suits, obviously lots of folks wearing sort of white on top to beat the heat, beat the Kona heat. Saw some core temperature. We talked about that a couple weeks ago on the podcast. You can put that on your heart rate strap to monitor your core temperature. And then of course on the run, there was just ice. But one cool thing I saw was somebody took ice and they put it in their bandana. So it'd be even so better than those sort of weird cooling things that they have. Just having a bigger headband and then just slamming a bunch of ice right in the front of your headband and leaving it there. So anyway, and of course, people pouring water and stuff all over themselves, but big ice chunks down the back, down the front. But anyway, Katie, did you see anything at Kona? Did anything strike you there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the whole situation with Sam Laidlaw was pretty interesting. And this actually speaks to the last point you have here, which is that he had an incredible swim and an incredible bike. But the truth is, Ironman is all about the run. And I don't really know exactly what happened in his race. It's possible that he overswam or overbiked. But at the end of the day, you have to save something. And we always say the way to approach an Ironman is race that swim and that bike like you're pacing your best friend in a marathon. What decisions are you making the whole swim and the whole bike such that you can still show up and do your best run race? Just because the return on, I can save a little bit of time here and there, it can really, really implode. And I think we saw that at a pro level here where Sam was walking by the end. He still had a really incredible race and kudos to him for finishing, but it's 100% about the run.
Yeah, I know. So the winner, so Patrick Lange, the winner, he was 8 or 9 minutes off Sam Laidlaw. So he was super patient. He was just basically riding his own race behind there. And as we know, Patrick Lange has a great run, but he was super patient on the bike and said, okay, yeah, he probably could have biked up there sooner, but being 8 or 10 minutes off, and as we know, in an Ironman, I mean, you were about 40 minutes off the first person in your first Ironman, right? And so being patient, doing your own race, and then really, working your strengths. And we often here at the Endurance Drive really focus a lot on the run, especially because triathlon ends up being a running race a lot of times.
Totally. Yeah. Patrick's cool, but I mean, he did not have my experience at 2019 Ironman Lake Placid. So exactly. I'm not impressed yet.
Exactly. When you come 40 minutes off the bike, then you'll be impressed. Yeah. I also put in interesting articles here on mental prep for both Patrick Lange and Magnus Dietli from at Kona. So it's kind of interesting. And then my last coaching insight here is I think I've spoken about Lawrence Van Lingam before. He's a South African. I think he lives in Colorado, works with a ton of pros, but he's just super committed to getting out running information, sort of holistic running information to the masses. He just opened up a new website And you can join there for monthly, or you can join for a lifetime membership. But anyway, I put his Instagram account in here. Start with the Instagram account if you haven't checked him out yet. See what he's all about. I'm excited to rebuild my running after this injury for this winter and sort of finally become hopefully a much better runner than I've been in the past. And I'm really basing a lot of my stuff on what Lawrence is teaching in terms of this. He's got a flow rope. He's got some backwards walking, some tire walking, all kinds of really interesting things that I've been working on already. And yeah, I'm super excited. So I just wanted to pass it out there. Is if you're stuck with your running, which is easy to do, then maybe check out Lawrence.
Awesome. Well, those were some great insights. And I think with that, we are ready to get into the meat of it today, which, as we said earlier, is all about how to set yourself up for success approaching a new season. So we're going to go through a bunch of different principles here. These are things that you should be thinking about kind of in November, December before you hit the ground running if you're getting started in January. Again, that 6 weeks leading up to the season starting, it's sort of a preseason. And there's a lot of action items here related to, training and prep. There's also a lot of action items just related to your life. So we're going to talk about both in the next section.
And all these, we got a pretty big list here. Our hope is that maybe like one or two of these really kind of stick with you, and maybe the rest aren't maybe that all relevant, but maybe you're already taking care of them. But anyway, the first one that I came up with here is that, I don't know about you, but like after the season's over and sort of process it a little bit, maybe you've done some goal mapping and you've mapped out maybe next year, but these are the things that, like, what are the sticking points? Like, what are these things that you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, you know what, I really want to get better at this thing, right? And so now you've had some time away from race season, and you've had some sleep cycles on this. For me anyway, they appear at night. I wake up in the middle of the night and go, oh gosh, I wish I was better at, wait for maybe X, Y, or Z or something. So that's the first thing I would say that to identify.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's great to bring up with your coach. It's important to have a conversation, whether you're coached by us or by someone else. It's important that you and your coach are on the same page about what those sticking points are. And keep in mind that your coach might also have some ideas about what the sticking points are that might help you. If you're like, I'm not really sure, I maybe think I need to improve in lots of things, they might be able to come in and say like, yeah, we could really bring that run up, and that would really change where you're placing in these races if that's your goal. Jim, I'm going to put you on the spot. What are the things that feel sticky to you? What's keeping you up at night as you think about next year?
Yeah, good question. I think, just one, rebuilding aerobic based fitness, I think is definitely one. And I think October was good for me to start on that. I can really get on the bike and spend some time on the bike now. So really trying to rebuild the aerobic foundation from the biking perspective. And then I think it just gets back to my last point in the coaching insight, was like I'm really working a lot in slow motion, if you will, with the Lawrence Van Lingham running stuff. And so I'm literally trying to rebuild my run form in slow motion going uphill. So I think that's the one that I wake up and I go, I really want to be able to just run better. I want it to feel like, there have been a few times in my life where running has felt fun and felt freeing, and it felt like an expression of myself. And again, we talk about this runner's high. I'm not sure what that is, but there have been times like, oh, that was really fun to be out there and do that. And I'd love to get to that point where it's like, even just to stand and run and be like, that was kind of cool, as opposed to, I think, a lot of through the years I've been, oh no, I have to go run because it's part of this whole triathlon thing. And so I haven't always found joy with running. So to boil it down, I want to find some joy next year with running, not just trail running, but even road running as well.
That's awesome. I really love that. And I feel like that then translates into a bunch of action items that you can put together, all the steps that we need to get there. And that's exactly back to goal mapping. So nice job. That was a good answer.
Well, I'm going to go right back at you then. So what are your state where you wake up and go, oh, I really want to break through on that?
Yeah. Okay. So I was thinking about this a little bit. I have two. One is I really want to work on bike speed and power. Last year, I think I did a lot of work on run stuff. I really enjoyed that. I kind of pushed swim to the wayside, and probably will push swim to the wayside again this year if we're being realistic, especially after the swim I did today where I was like, nope, this is not for me. But the bike is somewhere where I think last year I just kind of focused on maintaining. I did not do a ton of really, really quality bike workouts, intervals outside, things like that. I did a little bit of prep early in the season. But I think it would be cool to make that a huge focus and do things that scare me on the bike. Do these hard VO2 intervals, do a sweet spot progression, do some of the workouts that I give my athletes and have done in the past, but just haven't done more recently. And I think the reason I'd like to do that is that my goal races for the summer, I just talked about how I'm going to do Sea to Summit again. I had done it last year. I think I trained for Sea to Summit last year kind of like it was an Ironman. And I think I could train for it a little bit like it's a half Ironman. So doing some more high intensity intervals to get me there, I think will be important. And I really want to feel like I've improved on the bike. Again, last year I felt like I maintained with less volume, which is great. I mean, awesome to be able to maintain the fitness from the previous year with less volume than I'd done. But I want to be like, oh, wow, I really built my FTP. So that's one thing. And then the second thing I'd like to focus on is I know that there's a lot more that I can do with respect to mental prep. And so I think that I am someone who is very, very comfortable going long. I am not very comfortable going short and hard in terms of anaerobic stimuli, in terms of even just kind of like those half Ironman intervals where things get a little bit uncomfortable. And so I know that it will require some mental prep to even psych myself up to the point where I feel okay about doing that. And ultimately, I really want to get to a place where it's not a big deal. Whatever workout I have on the calendar, it's like, yeah, this is fine. I mean, it might hurt. It might be a little bit hard, but I don't want to feel really anxious going into it, for example, because I think that's sometimes what holds me back from doing hard things. It is never hard for me to say like, all right, 4-hour ride, zone 2, easy. And I get that that's actually really hard for some people who might be more comfortable with doing a hard 20-minute effort. But again, need to step into this sort of uncharted territory or outside of my comfort zone in order to get better. And figuring out what I need to do to emotionally regulate before that so I'm not as nervous about it, I think will be pretty important and will then serve me in prep for races, which are really hard stimuli, and I get nervous about that feeling of it being hard. So yeah, starting to roll that out right now. If I've identified that now as something that's sticky, I'm already kind of pulling out different mindset tools in just like the strength workouts that I'm doing now, or even some of these like gravel rides, because if I practice them now, I know it'll be a little bit easier when the work itself gets really hard.
This is a great podcast you should listen to. It's going to be a lot of mental prep stuff. So I'll send a link over to you when we finish this up and you can check it out.
That was awesome. Yeah. These two people that they talk about life, psychology, spirituality, it's just a little...
They have no idea what they're doing, but we let them go anyway. Yeah. No, it's interesting. The really interesting is I think your strength work is really going to pay off with the bike. With the bike. Well, it'll be really interesting to see. I think that's really going to pay off. I think both those goals, the strength, and then you're talking about like the half Ironman, that sort of tempo-ish kind of really uncomfortable thing. Like I find that really hard because you have to be so engaged for so long. That's part of what I find half Ironman in general is it's a really hard mental game because you can never just sort of like in Ironman, you sort of like, I'm gonna zone out, whatever. I'm here. I'm going to eat. I'm going to pedal a little bit. And then with the sprint Olympic, you just know it's gas on, right? But that half Ironman's that sort of tempo-y thing I find really hard because like I kind of got to go hard, but I can't go too hard, but I can't go too easy. I got to keep thinking about this. Like, it's just kind of uncomfortable. And your brain's, for me, my brain's always going like, do you want to back off a little bit? Because this kind of hurts, this is not that fun.
Yep, I have the exact same reaction. And I think I have told myself I hate that reaction. And thus there is a whole lot more anticipation around the whole thing. So yeah, I mean, I don't envy my athletes when I put that in, when they've got a 4x20 half Ironman power. And those are the exact type of workouts that I'm going to need to be doing. So, we've had seasons where we've done that a long time ago. I think it's mostly just getting back into it. And again, the more you expose yourself to things that are scary, the easier they become. So it's just kind of getting over that hurdle. But I will say, standing here a month out or 2 months out from even starting my season is about the scariest time to look at those intervals. Like even 5 minutes at half Ironman effort sounds insane right now because I'm doing my like a zone 0 trail flow. And it'll get there. And yeah, I think it's always helpful to start from that point.
Cool. Okay, we've got some cool things to work on this winter. This is kind of exciting. I'm glad we're having this discussion. Okay. All right. What's our next one here? Okay. So a little bit related to this one. So develop a daily nervous system management skill. And we talk about this again a lot in this podcast. But examples are breath work, meditation, mindfulness. And these are these broad categories, and each one of them has a lot of variations. So just explore and find out the method that resonates with you, and then start working on that on a daily basis to help you find that center. And it's interesting, Katie, I was talking to one of a friend of the pod, Steve, this weekend. He's going to ride almost 16,000 miles this year. Crazy amount of miles. He rode the Giro d'Italia, all 21 stages this year. So he's really bumped up his athleticism. And Steve is my age, so he's not a young pup anymore, but he's gone to the next level. And I said, hey man, like what's the key? Like how did you get to this next incredible level? And he kept mentioning yoga and ability to invoke his parasympathetic nervous system on a daily basis. He said, I have to now get to the point where I can turn on and I can turn off. And yoga has been his way of accessing that, because he's like, I got to recover. I can't be cranked up all the time. I have to shut it down so I can get ready for the next day. And I think we see that so much now in our athletes, like the good athletes who can do consistent work day after day after day are able to turn it on, but also then turn it off with some mechanism, whatever that may be.
Totally. And I think if you're not sure where you fall on that, one good indicator is like, how are you sleeping? Like when it's time to go to sleep, can you just fall asleep real quick and then you sleep for the whole night and you wake up and you're refreshed? That is probably one of the best signs that you're in a pretty good balance with your nervous system. So think about optimizing for sleep now and figure out what are those limiters, because I find it's a lot easier to work on that in the off season because you are not actively piling on. So if you have all the practices in place, then as you slowly ratchet up what the training is, it gets easier. But most people actually wait until they're totally out of whack. And then they're like, oh no, I have to deal with this. But I also have a 6-hour ride on the calendar tomorrow. And I also have a full-time job. And it's, I mean, you can hear the spiral almost in my voice of what that feels like. So when you have downtime and things feel okay, amazing time to really, really lean into even more chill. And that's what I've been doing this off season as well. So definitely agree that nervous system management is going to be huge.
Yep. What's our next one here?
Next one here. So this is actually related. We're going to talk about getting mentally refreshed, which I think has to do with balancing your nervous system. And I think it's important because we often can't really allocate time to that mental refreshing and self-care during the season because we are so busy. But doing the work now and really kind of emphasizing self-care to the point where you're not just at baseline, but you're above baseline, like you are feeling so great, is really important, because no matter what, that is going to get worn down as the season goes on. So I tell people, like, all off season, treat yourself. It is important to do all these little things that might even feel excessive during this time, or even too thinking about like, hey, are you interested in like a therapy routine, or are you interested in trying to sign up for meditation classes, breathwork class, anything that's going to help you make that a huge part of your life. All of that, I think, will translate really nicely into the season, even if you have to start pulling some of it away because of time later as things goes on.
And I think we talk about too, like just getting mentally refreshed is part of that's just being like, there's no workout at my training peaks.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. And I've seen too, sometimes athletes, I'm like, hey, you've got to take an off season. And then they'll just sort of start programming stuff for themselves. That's a little bit structured here and there. Yes. But I think getting to the point where you truly can wake up and say, what do I feel like doing today? And sometimes that's going to be absolutely nothing at all. And sometimes that's going to be a whole bunch of hours on your gravel bike. I think that's what you want to angle for. So if you feel like the anxiety of not being in a plan, that actually means you need to be even less on a plan, which is so counterintuitive. But eventually, if you lean into it, you will settle to the point where you're like, yeah, I'm really kind of happy where I am. And I've seen that progression with athletes. I will say the first 2 to 4 weeks is often a little bit rocky there, but you'll get there. And then after, 4 to 12 weeks of that, you'll be ready to kind of get back into the grind.
Yeah, as a coach, sometimes you'll see this, you go to the off season and all of a sudden you see a copy and paste from maybe a base week from 6 months ago and the athlete's training peaks. Like, and I always go, I can't remember putting it in there. I'm racking my brain going, did I put it in there? That seems like an awkward thing. That seems kind of weird. Like, oh, I know what happened there. I see you. So
the athlete has become the coach. Interesting.
Exactly right. Wow. Yeah, I don't remember putting those thresholds in there. That's so weird.
That's funny. Well, I think this segues us pretty nicely into, we've talked about the mind a little bit. There are some physical things that you can be doing now to set yourself up for success. And one of those things is to start building your aerobic base. Now, I wouldn't say it's important to do this with a ton of structure, but the earliest thing that you're going to do, come December, January, is a lot of zone 1-2 work. So if you really get the itch to get outside, I would use now as a time to be doing that kind of lower intensity work. I think it's a great time to get outside as the weather allows. I don't recommend really trying to push it in bad weather at this time of year, but if you get one of those amazing November 70-degree days, yeah, go outside on your bike for a while. Jim, you were talking about doing that in October a lot. I did that as well, just because it's something that you can do. And we know that building an aerobic base takes time. So as long as you've sufficiently recovered from the season before, maybe you took 4 weeks off or something, it is okay to get out and just keep your heart rate really low with what you're doing. Any smashing of hard intervals will not serve you all that well later in the season, but easy stuff is a great thing to be doing right now, as long as you avoid that gray zone. And
the next one here is back to what we talked about before, just get comfortable in the gym, right? And as you talked about, Kate, the strength work that you like to do is the best strength routine. As long as it includes progressive overload.
Yes.
Put a little asterisk in there. Yes.
And there are ways to progressive overload too that don't even require like a ton of equipment. Things like push-ups are really powerful, and you can progressive overload them by doing more each time you try to do them. Or you can start with ones that are sort of on your knees, and then you can go to the full version, and there's all these different variations. So think about just making it work for you. But I would say we've plugged getting a strength trainer before. If you're brand new to the gym and you have absolutely no idea how to do it, hiring someone now, even just for a few weeks, hey, maybe you're not paying your coach because you're taking an off season. This could be a time to pay a strength trainer instead. So we would recommend that during this time. Speaking of other people you should work with, we recommend using this time to address niggles or other recurring injuries with a physical therapist or other type of body worker. If there's been recurring things that really bugged you all season long, don't assume that they're just going to go away if you don't actively work on them. Maybe it's just that you do need some rest, but if it's the type of thing where you have a hamstring injury that acts up whenever you go for a long run, now you only run occasionally and it still bothers you when you do it, but you're not running as much, so it's not as noticeable. It will still probably bother you once the season starts. And so now is an amazing time to get that fixed. And sometimes that just means a couple of sessions of dry needling. Sometimes that means maybe there's like surgery involved, or maybe there's some really intense PT that you have to do. But now is absolutely the time to do it. And we've talked about also establishing a local network. Get in with the PT that you want to be seeing during the season when things acutely come up. That will be super, super important.
Something that I've seen a number of times happen is that exactly what you just said, is they may have a sort of recurring sort of chronic injury, and you go to the off season, you're like, oh, okay, it's fine. I'm not doing much. I don't need to deal with it. And then we start sort of generally ramping into the season. You know, base training typically isn't all that hard. It's always all that demanding. I mean, a lot of volume, not a lot of intensity sometimes. So that injury just sort of sits there in the background. And then say, for example, they're doing something pretty hard or something long, and then you start to get to the specific part of the season. You get 12 weeks out, 11 weeks out, 8 weeks out. We start putting in some race sims, start putting some big work in. And suddenly we get to somewhere between like week 8, 7, or 6 out from their A race, and we put quite a bit of load on the body. And all of a sudden those injuries come back, and you go, oh, I thought that was over. I hadn't seen it it's been gone for 6 months, and now I'm so surprised it came back. And it's just because you now have a sufficient load on the body where you've been exposed. And so I just can't emphasize enough, like if you have these chronic injuries that keep popping up year after year after year, and we all kind of do to some degree, then yeah, this is the best time to do it, because they will come back. I guarantee you they will come back, and they will come back, unfortunately, in the worst time of your build next year for your A race. Generally, it's when they show up.
Yes, and know that even if you're not really sure what it is, let's say you had a recurring injury that isn't really bothering you right this second, you can go into a PT and they can probably tell you what type of injury you're a ticking time bomb for. They can basically look at like, hey, is your pelvis aligned? Or, you know, do you have really weak calves? Or do you tend to like hunch your back? There's a million different things that could be happening, but they can tell you, hey, you really, really need to work on core stability, and here's some exercises to do that. And then if you spend 10 minutes doing those exercises like 5 times a week for your whole season, you might avoid some catastrophic thing later on. So think about going in now. And we will also link, we have a great episode with Neil, who is one of our favorite athletes and our resident physical therapist here at the Endurance Drive, on things to be thinking about if you are going to work with a PT. But yeah, there's a lot of great places to do that. And if you hop in our Discord, that's where we have a lot of recommendations for specific PTs to go to, Upper Valley, Boston, etc.
Yep, everybody should drive to Upper Valley and see Neil. So
next one here, Jim. You love this one.
I love this one because I recently went through a little, cleaning of the pain cave, shall we say. So the next one here is set up your pain cave. First thing, just clean up your pain cave and just start to organize it and make it super comfortable. Make it a place that you want to spend time. And if your pain cave, say for example, like in a garage, think about an indoor outdoor rug to warm up the floor. But just really anything, get fans and get a smart trainer, get a Zwift subscription. But again, I can't emphasize enough, just try to find a space for yourself that you're like, oh, I'm psyched to go there. And then when you go there, it just sort of says like, oh, I'm here to have fun and do a little bit of work.
This is a quick tangent, but Jim, when we started a podcast, I didn't think that we were going to get to the point in the podcast where we were recommending getting an indoor-outdoor rug to warm up your pain cave's floor, and I love it. I love everything about it. So definitely challenge that we get that indoor-outdoor rug. It's fantastic. And if your pain cave is a pain corner like mine, you can spruce that up with a decorative plant. I put a plant in my room so that it sort of separates the living dining area from the pain corner. There's a million ways to get really creative with this. So we're taking plant recs to make the pain corner a more hospitable environment.
Your pick of the week. Spice plant.
Awesome. All right, next one here. Now is a great time to start addressing any concerns about nutrition or hydration by establishing a relationship with a registered dietitian. Lots of people have lots of different goals. If you're thinking okay, maybe one of my biggest limiters during the season was something related to nutrition or hydration, now is a great time to kind of work on that. And we find that in the off season, it's easier to experiment a little bit. We're if you're going to go out for a long ride, maybe you're working with someone, maybe you can try a different strategy that might help you next season. And then related to this, we actually get this question as coaches all the time, and I try to tread pretty carefully around it. But people who have specific body comp goals, you can't be optimizing for body comp and performance at the same time. If you're really focused on body comp goals and or maybe you think that's something that's important for you from a health perspective, you can meet with a registered dietitian now who can help you think of a strategy to do that safely and not at the same time as optimizing performance. So bottom line here is just don't do this alone, and certainly don't do it in your on season. But in the off season, if that's your goal, working with the right person to do that, it can be a good relationship to establish.
Yeah, absolutely. The body is such a unique and a complicated machine that, plus one on that, just hire a pro who can just help you figure it all out, because there are general trends, but there's also then stuff that's very specific to you. And like you've hired a coach, just go and hire a dietitian to help you with all this stuff. So that's my first point. Second point is that I just broke down and started buying things off the feed because I wanted to, because I kept getting the ads. I'm like, what's this feed thing? I'm not going to buy anything from the feed. But then they give you like an $80 credit, I think, through various any podcast, or I think for Training Peaks. Logged on, and I started actually playing around. I bought some Morton, I bought a few other products, and I thought, I'm going to try these out starting now on some of the bigger stuff this year, just so I get a little jump start on nutrition and hydration stuff for next year. Because again, these are all these great new products that I haven't really even tried, and thought, okay, well, why not start now? So anyway, I had Morton the other day, first time. The Morton 320 it was awesome. It's thick. It's really thick. It's kind of like drinking, corn syrup, but it seems pretty effective. So anyway, good time to jump on that.
Totally. Yeah, you can have that with your Thanksgiving dinner. Just a nice big glass of it and wash down that turkey with some Martin.
Yeah, no more. I don't want stuffing. I just gonna give me some scratch super fuel with that. Exactly right, and some creatine, and I'm gonna have some protein powder. And so
there you go. That's perfect. That is our nutrition advice. That's all you need.
You'll be a real blast. You'll be a real fun time at Thanksgiving. Yeah. Don't do this. Don't be that person.
It's better than talking about politics. You might as well talk about endurance for sure.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, your favorite protein powder at Thanksgiving. Yeah. Good point.
All right, next one here. Now is an amazing time to set up your memberships and identify your weekly schedule for things like the pool, the gym, the track, etc. You will find, for example, if you wait to get a gym membership until like January, that's when everybody in the world is trying to do that. So now there's not as many people there. Think about just getting all your ducks in a row so there's no friction once the year starts. And all these strategies that we've talked about are really about reducing logistical friction such that you can hit the ground running and just do all of your workouts as planned on that first day. But if you hated your pool and the weekly schedule is really bad this year, now's the time to do a little shopping, try different pools, do day passes, see what works for you, and then hopefully it'll be really smooth once you get into the season.
Yeah, I think it's funny when athletes say, hey, I want to start, January 1, and I'm always like, yeah, sure, you start whenever you want to. But I have to say, hey, think about December 1st, just for this exact reason, like to get all the gear, to get all the memberships, get all the schedules, because, hopefully during Christmas, you'll have time with your family and you're not really focusing on endurance. And so it's nice to kind of use the first part, like some of November and parts of December, just to kind of sort all these logistics out. And then when you hit the ground running on January 1, everybody's super motivated on January 1. And it's great to arrive at January 1 going, like, everything is in place. I am ready to hit the go button. I'm going already. So yeah, I think it's a great time to do all this stuff.
All right, next one here. This is important. We talk about it's good to have a good relationship with like a PCP. I find it's helpful to get some baseline blood work done right before you start a season, and then you can maybe get on a supplementation routine if you need to do that. Again, a PCP is helpful here, a dietitian is helpful here, and we're not going to give recommendations on specific supplementation to do, but there's a lot of things that can be kind of deficient in athletes. So I recommend people consider getting a CBC, CMP, and check for also TSH, vitamin D, iron, ferritin, B12, magnesium. We're going to put all these on the show notes. But these are just things that I've seen come up as off in athletes and people in general before. And many of us have deficiencies that we may not be aware of and know that building up those stores can take time. So if you want to avoid the frustration of like, oh my gosh, I trained for 4 months and didn't realize that I was super deficient in B12 and that's why I felt terrible, maybe just get that baseline done now. And then you can compare it later in the season. If you start not feeling good, we can at least rule out whether it's anything that's sort of supplement or vitamin mineral related.
And along with maintenance or regular work, you should go to get your bike fit, right? And it's a great time here to do that. So before you bring it inside, clean it up, go get a bike fit. And or if you have a different bike in your pain cave than what you normally ride, then you should try to set those two bikes up as similar to each other. So, for my bike in my pain cave, it's probably a little bit more relaxed than my outdoor bike, but you want them to be somewhat similar. So anyway, good time of year to get your bike serviced, get a bike fit, and take care of all that.
And if you are putting your bike on the trainer to stay, please clean your bike. Don't put a dirty bike on the trainer that's going to stay dirty until April of next year. You got to clean it. It's super important.
No dirty bikes in the pain cave. That is rule number. That's rule number one to Fight Club. Yes.
All right, just a couple more here. This is related. Make sure that you're getting all your gear in order. So if you are planning to invest in something like a new bike or a new smart trainer, now is the time. I find there can be a lot of friction if you're trying to do that mid-season, and you might find some good end of season or Black Friday deals coming up. So think about what that might look like for you, especially because you don't want to have like a certain bike and do all your training on that, and then the week before the race, you're ready to do something different.
And the last couple ones here is have conversations with your primary support peeps about what the season is going to look like and manage expectations. And we've talked about this in other podcasts as well too. But yeah, you're asking a lot of yourself and you're asking a lot of your support people. So get in sync now with folks. And again, I sort of rolls into the last one here. Katie, you can talk about this about goal mapping, but I think part of goal mapping is what is your primary support system like?
Totally. Yeah. Our last point here, again, goal mapping, identifying that purpose. See episode 49. We're going to link it in the show notes. But know that when you're goal mapping, one of the key steps is identifying possible hurdles or things that might get in the way of achieving your goals. And often if there's a disconnect between you and your primary support peeps about what your training is going to look like, that can be a big barrier. So you can kind of ward that off now by having those conversations and just making sure that everybody's on board with what sacrifices might need to be made to make this thing happen, and whether there's anything else you can do differently to try to smooth things out before things get started. Did we do it?
We did it. I think we did it. Wow. There's a lot of interesting stuff in there. My list is pretty long of things to do now.
I know. Yeah. I think everyone's going to have a long list. But again, the one thing on this list that you do is better than the 10 things that you don't do or whatever that is. I think I totally butchered the way that we're supposed to think about perfect and good. But just try to do some things on this list is probably the upshot here. And if you need help with anything, definitely reach out to us because we don't have huge rosters right now. We're about to have absolutely enormous rosters, but we have time to answer your questions. So always reach out with any of those questions. And that takes us, I think, to our last couple segments, including listener questions. Jim, we have finally made it 6 episodes later to the end of the AMA questions. So thank you to anyone who has just listened to every single episode waiting to get their questions answered. The first one here I will read. It says, how do you maintain low heart rate zones on technical mountain bike climbs? My heart rate will spike pretty easily, and I find it hard to mitigate unless I completely stop and let my heart rate come down. It ends up feeling like a high heart rate ride for the whole climb. What is the approach to improving this? And I think this is a question that also applies to hilly running, hilly road bike running, any situation where you feel like your heart rate is spiking really, really high and you can't get it down. So, Jim, what would you recommend for a situation like this?
Oh my gosh. First thing I recommend is don't tend to go mountain bike, but that's just me though. I'm terrible at mountain biking. I just fall over. So, but anyway, so beyond that, really on any, whether it's on the bike, particularly on the bike, road biking, mountain biking, what I tend to focus on is when I hit hills, and this is a little bit different with probably technical mountain biking, but I really focus on like relaxed feet and relaxed ankles. And I really think about pushing a very smooth pedal stroke. And then I sort of play this little game, which is like, how little can I push to get up this hill while still moving forward and not falling off the bike? And so if you practice this enough, you'll start to see hills as a place to relax and a place that you feel like you don't need to push the watts because the hill is really doing the work for you. So I only see hills now. I'm like, oh, this is great. I don't have to go up, get the work. The work is here in the hill. And then the second thing I would say is that, and this happens to me all the time, I'll get in a hard section on a bike or even running mountains, for example, and I'll look at my heart rate. And when it's hard, and I'll be like, oh my God, look at my heart rate. It's so high. Oh my gosh, I'm way out of my zones now. And then what I realize, I really look at it when I'm back, like going downhill or going on flats. And so then I come back and I blow things up in the training peaks and I look at my average heart rate and I realize, oh my gosh, it turned out that was a complete like zone 2 run on the average. Just that I always had this sort of bias of looking at my heart rate when things were really hard.
Yeah, I think this is great advice. And I'll add too, it doesn't need to be that your heart rate is always, always, always in zone 2, no matter what. We talk about how like in 80-20, that 20% is actually really important for raising the ceiling of your threshold and improving the function of the mitochondria, et cetera. So I think my advice here would be if you're going to do a ride that has a bunch of technical and steep stuff, assume that that's going to go in the 20% bucket and be more of this intense session. And then you can balance out the rest of your week with kind of easier terrain and gentler stuff that doesn't really spike your heart rate as much and where it's easier to remain in control. And one thing I'll add here too, I love what you were talking about with trying to relax in hill climbs. And a cue that I got when I was first learning to ride a road bike was thinking about as you're climbing uphill, your hands should be like you're playing the piano. They're so light. And if you're just gripping as hard as you can, that probably means that you're pushing a little bit hard and you're not relaxed. And so the lighter grip that you can have, because you don't need to hold on super, super tight when you're going uphill, just think about playing the piano, really resting super, super light. And that can maybe help you just keep things as relaxed as possible.
Yeah, I love the idea of like of relaxing or your hands or feet, because you think about it, like there is no circumstance ever in life or in sports where tensing up your muscle really helps a lot. Maybe in boxing when you get hit in the face or something, but in the chest. But otherwise, I think like you got to be relaxed and smooth.
Yep. Brace for impact. In boxing, at least, right? I was trying to think about like, what are the sports where you have to brace for impact? It's like, well, if you're doing competitive water skiing and you're falling, like maybe you should brace for impact or something. But other than that,
It's a new tagline. The endurance drive, brace for impact.
I was going to turn away some potential clients, which is probably good with our overflowing rosters right now.
Get tough. Get the endurance drive. Brace for impact.
Amazing. Okay, last question here. Any tips for managing nutrition when you just can't eat anymore? I try to eat a lot in the first hour or two, but then I am just repulsed by food for several hours. Sometimes it comes back, but not for a while if I'm in a big effort. So my answer to this one is probably that liquid can be key if you really can't eat any more food. In every Ironman that I've ever done, I have a plan for nutrition on my run, and then I always just devolve into a ton of flat Coke by the end, which is an amazing source of carbs. And if you were watching the Ironman World Championships, most of the men were just chugging full bottles of Coke at the aid stations. I would say if you're doing trail stuff or ultras, you could even put flat Coke in a soft flask. I would say also it's important to try and switch up your nutrition sources so there's something different to look forward to. Jim, I remember you sent like brownies and marshmallows ahead to run special needs in an Ironman before, because that's going to be different, and that's sugar, and it's nutritionally just as great as your fancy bars, your gels. And then lastly, I'd say at a certain point, it is valuable to just force yourself to nibble a little bit of something, because your body will start to feel that energy a little bit more and will come back online. And then this is some advice that I say is like your very last ditch resort here. It probably applies a little bit more to the Ironman 70.3 context, but I'm pretty sure there's some cool science on if you can even just get some carbs in your mouth, that can sometimes very temporarily trick your brain into thinking it's okay. Again, you can't fake your way through a whole Ironman on this strategy, which is why I hesitate to even recommend it. But if you're like at mile 9 of a 70.3 and you know that you will throw up if you eat anything else, put some Gatorade in your mouth, swish it, and then spit it out. And it's possible that that can trick your brain kind of into just getting through those final miles. But don't use that more. You can basically have like one pass of that, and then you actually will end up bonking. So it can be sort of a hit or miss tip.
Yeah, bonk, brace for impact. Yeah. Yeah, everything we said. And this always happens. The GI gods show up on race day. So you train with all this stuff. Like, this is my nutrition. This is what I'm doing. And you get to race day like, oh man, I don't want any of this stuff at all after a few hours. So what I always try to do is I always try to like be able to, I just want to try to be a little bit flexible. Like, some liquid calories, some solid calories, some sweet, some savory. And so I'd say just, in your race times, your big days, just try to have a mixture of stuff. And I like to always tell people, like, have more. If you think you're going to say, this is going to play number, like you need, 1,000 calories on your person for the day, I would say bring 1,500 calories or even 2,000 calories to make it like a buffet, essentially. So you can go up and say, oh, I'd like that, but now I want this, right? So yeah, just be flexible and just try a bunch of different things, because there's always curveballs. I don't know if anybody said, on the bike, usually you can execute the race plan. But I would say, so the bike is sort of like playing classical music. You sort of just play it note for note, but then you come to the run, it's more like jazz. It's a lot of improv. There's a general theme you're trying to get calories down, but how you get them down, flat Coke, potato chips, oranges, whatever it is, or gels, like you got to be able to just do anything at any point, play any note at any point.
We're 2 for 2 on these music analogies today. I'm loving it. It's really good. That's awesome. Okay, we have made it to challenge of the week. So Thanksgiving is coming in a couple of weeks. I love Thanksgiving. So my challenge of the week is some gratitude practice. You mentioned this earlier in terms of things that can help alleviate stress, but I'm going to say gratitude practice endurance edition. So try to write down something you're grateful for in sport. I will share one. I'm grateful for the extended summer weather that we've had and the ability to get outside and enjoy it. I am sure that because I am saying this, there will not be a single other 70-degree day, and it will be 30 degrees for the next 6 months. But I'm going to put it out there. It's been an awesome season, and I'm probably ready to get on the trainer anyway. I feel like I've been flying a little close to the sun with my trail escapades, and I'm grateful for all of those. But yeah.
Are you going to be grateful for the 4x20s half Ironman effort?
Maybe that's the way to get through it. Is like just say that I'm grateful for it, trick my brain. And I will say it's important to say like, hey, I am grateful for my body's ability to do this, right? Because, we can come and haw about all these difficult things, but the second that we get injured, we're like, I would give anything to do 4x20s right now. So I do think there's a big space for gratitude there, knowing that we are privileged to be able to move our bodies in this way, even if it seems scary. And yes, it's going to be a little bit hard, But again, gratitude works for a lot of things. And I think it probably will work for that as one of my strategies for getting more comfortable with the discomfort as well.
Yeah, I love this. I feel like gratitude is like ibuprofen. Like you can practice gratitude in so many different places, and it's like always makes the situation better. Almost never makes it worse. So yeah, I love this one. Yeah, and mine I referred to back up in the coaching insights, which is just take 2 walks during your day off. Take 2 walks. Take one in the morning. Take one in the afternoon, and see if you feel better or you feel that recovery.
All right, let's close it out. Gear pick of the week. So I'm recommending a gear item that came up, I believe, 2 episodes ago. We were sharing about some cycling gear for the fall winter. Jim, you and I both really love these half tights. They're called Knickers by ASOS, and they're sort of like a brushed felt material. They're really warm, but they're great for when it's not deep winter yet. Like anything in that 40 to 60 degree range, I really, really love these tights. So great padding as well. I find them super comfortable for really long stuff in this time of year. So I'm going to link them. They're called the ASOS UMA GT Spring Fall Half Knickers C2. It's a long title. And I'm pretty sure that there's a men's analogous version as well that Jim can probably link in our show notes.
Knickers, I'll die on this hill. They're the best. And and yes, you can get knee warmers. Like that's the other thing to do is you get knee warmers. That's a cheap way for when just use your summer stuff. But there's something so delightful about Knickers, and I can't bother because I learned how to bike in Anchorage, Alaska, and there the summers used to be, the average temperature used to be 54 degrees, which typically meant it was 40s and 50s with a 20-mile-an-hour wind. So the Knickers just ended up being like the play there, and you never even reached for summer bibs there. It was always Knickers, in the summertime. So anyway, but I think for most Northeast folks and even some folks who live in the Eastern Seaboard in the wintertime, Knickers are amazing. So get Knickers. All right. And so it's daylight savings. Unfortunately, daylight losing's time. It's getting dark. So peeps, be safe out there. And I'm recommending the Lezyme Light Drive 1200. Actually, they make all kinds of front lights, but just get any front light really. But this one throws a ton of light, and you can go out and get benighted and turn this thing on, and you'll be seen, and you will easily see a ton of the road as well too. So get yourself a light.
Yes, and I will say we have recommended this many times before, but if you haven't listened to those episodes, Garmin Varia for your tail light. It is a radar light that blinks when a car is behind you. I will also die on that hill of everyone needs to get a Garmin Varia. So if you're trying to figure out a Christmas list, that's the number one thing to put on your list is a tail light, and then the second thing is a front light. So got to stay safe out there.
Get a tail light so you don't have to brace for impact.
I know. There is the extended slogan that goes on the back of the Endurance Drive t-shirts. Right. That is the gear order for next year. It's going to be awesome. Sweet. All right. Well, we did it. Hopefully with these tips, everybody is set up for success next season. Let us know how your progress is as you're navigating all of these crazy tips. But probably the biggest and most important one is show up excited. We're excited for you. It's going to be an amazing year. And yeah, if you're new here, please consider dropping us a rating or a review so we can keep growing the podcast. And we will see you next time.
Thanks, peeps.